Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about why maybe the trade deadline is the reason the Philadelphia Phillies have not been playing their best lately. Yes, it could be the deadline's fault. I'll explain in today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is indeed Locked On Phillies. I am your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for checking us out. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the city of Philadelphia in sports talk radio, 5 years at 97.5 The Fanatic, then 3 years a credentialed media member of the Philadelphia Phillies. And this is my third year hosting Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form. If you're checking us out on YouTube and are yet to subscribe, would love it if you subscribe to the YouTube, get you notifications when new episodes are posted. Super easy to do, costs you nothing, really helps us out. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. So we're going to have an interesting conversation. The Philadelphia Phillies have not been at their best since the return from the All-Star break. They lost a series to the Pirates. They lost a series to the Twins. It is a road trip. They are much better at home. But I have a bit of a possible explanation for why the Philadelphia Phillies have not been playing as well as they normally do. And it's a next level way of thinking. So you could buy it, you could not buy it. I'm going to make my case. First, though, the thing that I want to look at, right, is what else could the Philadelphia Phillies be doing right now? I'll read you their lineup from yesterday where they scored 4 runs, missed a lot of offensive opportunities, didn't have the right defense, didn't have the bullpen stuff that they needed. Like, it wasn't the best game. But Kyle Schwarber led off. You're not going to ever do anything different there. Trey Turner batted second, fine. Bryce Harper batted third, fine. Alec Boehm cleanup, fine. Those are all all-star starters right there. Kyle Schwarber's your leadoff hitter. Brandon Marsh batted 5th in left field because JT Realmuto had the day off. Garrett Stubbs was in the lineup. So you'll start JT over Garrett Stubbs in an ideal day. JT still working his way back, getting settled in after coming off the IL. So I don't hate that. And also, I know that Aaron Nola, who likes to throw to Garrett Stubbs sometimes. It's totally fine. So it's good for one game. You can get better there. But let's say JT Realmuto bats 5th, Garrett Stubbs not in the lineup, then Brandon Marsh is going to have to hit somewhere. What else are you going to do in left field? You have Weston Wilson out there who's got barely any experience at the major league level and hasn't really been overly productive. He's a solid player for what he is, a guy you can bring up and get you some innings to keep you afloat, but he's not a guy that you're going to be putting over Brandon Marsh as an upgrade. He's not. Christian Pache is just not a major league caliber hitter. I'm sorry. I've defended him in the past. I said, give him some time, figure out what you've got. He's got a high pedigree as a prospect, just hasn't really panned out. Great defender, not great at the plate. So you're not getting much more in the lineup if you start Christian Pache over Brandon Marsh. Nick Castellanos was in right field yesterday. He's been in right field all year. That's not going to change. Bryson Stott is a second. He's struggling. You could play Edmundo Sosa there, but you're playing a guy who you brought on this team to be a kind of utility infielder backup. And I like Edmundo Sosa. He's playing really well. I don't see him as like an everyday starter on this team. So at most, you've got 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other when it comes to Edmundo Sosa or Bryson Stott at second base right now. I've told you in previous episodes, I would rather let Bryson Stott work out of it. That may not be an option if he keeps being rough at the plate. He went 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts yesterday. That's one change you could make. And then in center field, you have Johan Rojas. I mean, it's the same thing as Marsh and left. Could you play Pache? Sure. Is he a defensive upgrade? No, they're close to even. I think Rojas is better. And at the plate, they're pretty much the same guy, just not giving you a lot offensively. Rojas batting .231 for the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, Pache is not at that mark, but Pache hasn't had as many opportunities. With Christian Pache, you're looking at a guy so far this year that's batting .202. It's just maybe with opportunities he could have gotten that a little bit higher, but you don't have a lot of other options. So if you're worried about, what's going on with the offense, Rob Thomson's doing all he can do. There's not many guys that you can put in that are upgrades, which is why the trade deadline is very important. We're going to talk about trade deadline priority and everything that we're looking up as far as, well, basically what could be done next week when you talk about the Philadelphia Phillies and other targets they could have. So we'll talk about that coming up. And that's basically the lineup. You can't do too much different. As far as the starting rotation is concerned, you've done everything you could do in the starting rotation. I mean, that's what you have at this point. You've got great pitchers. They're not going to always give you 7-inning shutout. Starting rotation has not been the issue. Sanchez, Nola, Suarez, Wheeler, all been good. Fifth spot, still a question mark. That's how it's going to be, folks. And then the bullpen. Let's just think about the guys that you have available. I trust Matt Strahm. I trust Jeff Hoffman. Those are the guys that you're looking at right now where I'm like, okay, I got no problem with them in any situation. You want to save them for high leverage, but if you feel like the 8th inning is a bigger spot, if you feel like the 7th inning is a bigger spot, you go to them when you go to them. I don't have a lot of faith in Jose Alvarado right now. I think he can work out of it, but is he really a better option than like Gregory Soto, who threw yesterday? I don't know that I can say that at this moment in time. Gregory Soto's not a great option right now. Ryan Kerkering's been a little bit shaky lately. Jose Ruiz is only going to give you so much. Junior Marte, I don't think is a major league caliber arm. And that's your bullpen. Forgive me if I'm forgetting anybody. Sir Anthony Dominguez, I don't know. He's been rough all year. You can't really trust him in high leverage. So what do you really want Rob Thomson to do is my point. They're kind of hamstrung right now with what they have. It's not a bad place to be, but it's not like there are guys that aren't pitching that should be, guys that Rob Thomson isn't putting in the lineup that should be hitting. Like they kind of are where they are as they prepare for the trade deadline, which brings me to my argument about the trade deadline. When I look at what the Philadelphia Phillies have done lately, I had a thought yesterday because there's been this push on the TV broadcast to mention Rob Thomson believes Gregory Soto needs more high leverage innings. And I had a tweet yesterday that said, no, he does not, which I think is correct. And someone tweeted, and he's like, how does the rest of Philadelphia get a bad feeling when Gregory Soto steps on the mound and Rob Thomson doesn't? And it got me thinking, right? Is there a chance? Well, there's more than a chance. I'm going to tell you it's part of what the Philadelphia Phillies are doing right now. Ahead of the trade deadline, with this big of a buffer, you have time to try things. And why would you be trying things that don't necessarily give you the best chance to win ball games? You need to know for sure, or as sure as you can be ahead of the deadline, where you need help. And that means starting some backups. See if these guys look like MLB players that you could use, or if you need upgrades at their position, mainly talking about the outfield there. The bullpen. You may want to, like the Gregory Soto thought process yesterday may have been, hey, it's not probably the best spot for him. If this was Game 7 of the World Series, we probably would not be going to Gregory Soto. But I need to know, is Gregory Soto a guy that can be a high leverage guy, or are we going to need to be more aggressive with a bullpen acquisition at the trade deadline? I think that Rob Thomson is trying to give as many opportunities to guys on the bubble as possible. And it could be something that comes down from higher up. It could be Dave Dombrowski and Sam Fold in the front office saying, hey, man, we'd really like to see Soto. We're not sure if we need to go get another lefty reliever. If we do, we'd like to know ASAP. So go ahead and throw him in some high leverage spots, see if he's got what it takes. He has not passed the test, but that's the thing. The Phillies have the luxury. There are teams that are fighting just to be in a buyer's market. If you're right around 500 or a couple games over, you don't really know if you're buyers or sellers right now. I mean, you look at the Pirates, who the Philadelphia Phillies played earlier in the week. They're like hovering right around 2 games on either side of 500 on any given week. That's a tough spot to be. They've got to play their best players because they've got to win ball games to get to a point where they can convince the front office that it's worth buying, or rather the front office can convince the ownership that it's worth trading prospects to bring in players to help you make a playoff push. The Phils are not in that spot. We're going to look at the standings coming up in our final segment and take a peek at where they're at compared to their peers, and it still is pole position, to use a racing term. They're in a great spot. So I think what the Phillies have been doing is they've been leveraging the advantage that they got from an amazing start to the season and a great spot in the standings, and the Atlanta Braves' continued issues in the division to say, hey, we're going to pitch some guys. We're going to hit some guys that are not necessarily in our long-term plans for the season in these type of roles, but we need to see what they are. Like, you don't learn a lot of guys, learn a lot about guys. There's what I'm trying to say. If you keep them sitting on the bench in the bullpen or on the bench in the dugout, you got to put these guys out here to give them an opportunity to show if they're ready for the moment or not. And unfortunately for the Phillies, there's a couple guys right now that do not look like they're ready for the moment. So do you need another bullpen arm? After this week, it looks like yes. Do you need another outfielder? After this week, it looks like yes. And you could have been in a situation. It's silly to evaluate that all off of 2 weeks. We brought that up yesterday. Like, I do think the larger sample size of the first half of the season is the better point of data. But when I look at it, I say, okay, I can kind of understand why they would be doing this. And that's why I think you've seen some uncharacteristic moves by Rob Thomson, some uncharacteristic performance by the Phillies. It doesn't completely absolve them. They have not been playing well. There are guys that need to step up. They haven't played their best baseball. But I do think part of the equation is ahead of the trade deadline. They're taking their time to get guys out there so they know exactly what they need. Dave Dombrowski is thorough. Rob Thomson is thorough. And they want to know what they can do and can't do ahead of the July 30th at 6 p.m. deadline. So that's part of why I think the Philadelphia Phillies have not been playing their best baseball as of late. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a couple other names that have popped up as potential trade deadline pieces for the Philadelphia Phillies. We've run through a bunch of names at this point. I'm going to recap who we've talked about already, just give you names. And then we're going to dive into another outfielder and another reliever. The reliever could be a guy that fits as far as, well, two players in one trade, like we talked about with Brent Rooker and Mason Miller out in Oakland. So we'll discuss that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Supply House first, though. They're awesome. You can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com, they're very reliable. They're the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info that you need to help get the job done right. And you can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. They're amazing. You get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. California to Philly. I know Philly's not on the coast. You get it. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros of the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM. And you can order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with the folks over at SupplyHouse.com. Let's also talk about Game Time, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. The Phillies have some fun home series. They got the Guardians coming up starting tomorrow night. They have the Yankees in town. That's always a fun series. Our foes from up 95. There's a lot of great games in Philadelphia right now. You want to get tickets? Game Time's the number one place to go. You want to get tickets late? You're not sure if you want to go to the game? Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They got killer last minute deals. They've got all-in prices so they don't surprise you with fees at the end. You can see your view from your seat before you purchase the ticket so you know where you're watching from. And their lowest price guarantee means that if you find a seat in the same row and section, they'll give you 110% of the difference. They're the best. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, but it's not just baseball tickets. No, you can buy comedy, concert, theater, all kinds of tickets on Game Time. You got to go pop around the app and see what they have. You might find an event you weren't even planning on going to that you say, this is too good of a deal not to. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. You know, it's funny, actually. So I have the wrong graphic up here on the side if you're watching on YouTube. It's from yesterday's episode, but it's relatively similar to the layout of today's episode. So just bear with me on that. My apologies. A little bit of a graphics error on my part. But we are going to talk about trade deadline potential acquisitions here. And there are some very interesting names that are still out there. We've talked about Luis Robert, Brent Rooker, Jazz Chisholm. As far as the bullpen's concerned, we've talked about Mason Miller. We've talked about some other guys that are a little bit lower down on the list, Tanner Scott, guys like that could be a fit for the Philadelphia Phillies. But a couple other names. And These are from Matt Gelb's most recent Athletic article. He does a great job covering the team. If you have the Athletic and you're not reading Matt Gelb, I don't know what in the world you're doing. He's one of my main sources for information on the Phillies if I can't be down there myself. And he's brought up a couple of names. The first one we'll look at is an outfielder. And this name's been tossed around a little bit. Plays in Detroit. You know the name, Mark Canha. He's been around forever, man. The total amount of major league seasons he's played 10 years at the major league level. He spent a year with the Mets, actually a year and some change with the Mets. He was with Oakland for a while, Milwaukee, and he's now with the Detroit Tigers. This year he's batting .234, but he's batting .299 against lefties, which makes him a strong platoon option for Brandon Marsh in left field. You want to find a right-handed bat that's been hitting lefties well. Not a whole lot of pop this year. Only 7 homers, a solid defender, not like a plus defender. He's one of those lower level options that isn't going to make a pop. Like, you're not going to trade for Mark Canha and be partying in the streets of Philadelphia. But what you could see is a guy that gives you a better platoon option over Weston Wilson and Christian Pache. Pache is not a major league hitter right now. I told you already, he's hitting barely over the Mendoza line. Weston Wilson is barely a major league player. And that's not a knock on Weston Wilson. I'm just saying, like, he does not have the major league experience to be a major player on this team right now. Mark Canha does. He's been in the majors for a decade. He is a veteran that's been around the block. He has been in some big games, not as many as you would like, but he's played in a lot of Major League Baseball games. He's a guy that would fit pretty well as a platoon option for Brandon Marsh. And that's what it seems like the Phillies are leaning towards. More of a platoon option in the outfield. That splash move, the Luis Robert, the Brent Rooker, it doesn't seem as likely today as it did maybe a week or two ago. And that's just the way the Philadelphia Phillies are attacking it. It could be that other teams that are more in need are driving up the price. But Mark Canha is a guy to keep your eye on from the Detroit Tigers. No doubt they will be selling. No doubt the Philadelphia Phillies will be interested. I don't know if the deal gets done. The other thing that they're looking at, and why say the other thing, in yesterday's episode, I told you I think reliever is the bigger priority right now when I reevaluate where this team is at. I did see something in Matt Gelb's article where he said the Phillies believe that the reliever market is going to be slow until maybe sometime next week. Like, there's no impending moves at this moment on Thursday. Now, that could change. They could get a call tonight and say, hey, how's the deal for this guy? But I'd be expecting Monday and Tuesday to be a little bit heavier on the news front with any of these moves. This guy pitches down in Washington, a righty, a hard thrower. He's been around a little bit, not a huge veteran presence, but you may know him from his time in the division. Kyle Finnegan is an arm that the Phillies are apparently interested in. Kyle Finnegan, 32 years old, turning 33 soon. He'll be 33 before the season is over. He's under team control for next year, too. So you're getting 2 years of him. And as a reliever, 32 years old is young. 32 as a reliever is like 27, 28 as a position player. So you're not getting like an old aging player. Throws really hard, been really good this year. Made his first All-Star team as a member of the Nationals this year. He's got a 2.32 ERA coming out of the bullpen with that absolute gas he's been throwing. And you look at his stats since 2020 when he made his major league debut. He's never had a season where he's had an ERA over 3.76. Now, that's high-ish for a reliever, but it's not like he had 1 year where he had like a blow-up 5 ERA or he hasn't been able to. He's thrown in the past 3 seasons 68 games in 2021, 66 games in 2022, 67 games in 2023. So you can expect him to be right around that 66, 67, 68 mark this year. He's thrown 44 already. He's thrown back-to-back a bunch. So he's a high usage guy, and you're looking right around 66 innings every year for him. He threw 69 nice innings last year. So you can get some work out of him. You could roll back his workload and try and have him fresh for the postseason and have him be a high leverage arm. I did not like in Matt Gelb's write-up, and it's not Matt's fault, but something the Phillies said about if they acquire Finnegan, it's most likely he will not be used in a set role. I want them to have a set closer, but I've been fighting this battle for years, and they will not do it. So at this point, I'm kind of yelling into the void when it comes to that. I kind of like Kyle Finnegan. He is not Mason Miller, but he is maybe the best fit with a guy that you could keep on this roster going forward. The Phillies like guys that they can keep for an extra year or so. I mean, most teams do. The more team control you can have, the better the investment. It'll cost you one of your lower level prospects, maybe 2 guys in like the 15 to 20 range in your top prospects list, maybe not even that high. Like, Washington's not doing anything. They're going to be selling at the deadline. the price may be bid up by other contenders, but he won't cost you any of your top guys. If you move somebody in the top 10 for Kyle Finnegan, I'd be surprised. If you do, it'll be like 9 or 10. Like, you're not Aiden Miller, Andrew Painter, Justin Crawford. You hang up the phone if they're mentioned in a Kyle Finnegan conversation. But we talked about Lane Thomas previously in our preview of the trade deadline. Lane Thomas down there in Washington as well. So what you could see is a platoon guy who hits lefties lefties really, really well. And also Kyle Finnegan in the same deal. Kill two birds with one transaction. I don't think that's the exact saying. You get what I mean, though. That could be appealing for the Phillies. The less phone calls you have to make, you get one good price and two players. Well, that's a much more comfortable deal. So that's another name I'd keep an eye on is Kyle Finnegan, maybe paired with outfielder Lane Thomas from the Washington Nationals. So those are some other guys I have my eye on ahead of the deadline. Shout out once again to Matt Gelb and his work in The Athletic with listing out some of those names. There's a lot of options for the Phillies, a lot of players, nothing flashy really, but definitely some options in the mid-tier that could make a difference on this team. And that seems to be the most likely spot for the Phillies. Coming up as we wrap up, it's an off day. We haven't really taken a look at the standings in a minute. So I want to take a peek at where the Phillies are compared to their peers, just as kind of a therapy session for where we're feeling right now as Phillies fans. If you're a little bit nervous about how the team's been on a slide since the All-Star break, we'll get into that coming up as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Booking.com, though. Booking.yeah. They're the title sponsor for this episode. I'm back in the radio zone where I do sports updates, and they are the best place to help you with your summer travel. Summer travel's heating up, especially travel for baseball games. I'm going to Arizona coming up in the start of August for the Phillies Diamondbacks series, and it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rivals' cities. You got hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city. They can help you out with all of that. So if you want to go to Atlanta, New York, Washington, Miami, all good places this time of the year to visit, go ahead and check out our folks over at Booking.com because, once again, the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com on the site, or you can download the Booking.com app and book your vacation there. Let's also talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They got over 5 million active members. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's not like those other apps where you put together a near perfect lineup and all of a sudden some random dude from Milwaukee, Wisconsin has a perfect day and you don't get anything for it. No, all you do is you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's just you against the numbers. So you look at guys like Bryce Harper, guys like Zach Wheeler, guys like JT Realmuto and Trey Turner, the big names for the Phillies. If you think the Phillies are going to have a big day offensively, like maybe in their first game against the Guardians tomorrow, you look at their hits number, maybe you take more than their hits and you put a couple of those together and you're good. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 and you could do it in 60 seconds. It's that quick to set a Prize Picks lineup. Plus, you download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is the best. You just pick more or pick less. It's that easy. All right, let's take a peek at the standings, folks, because the Philadelphia Phillies have been on a bit of a slide lately. I know people are nervous. I got to be honest. I'm a little worried about the way they've been playing lately, but sometimes you need to just look at the standings section of the MLB.com app, and it will show you just how good of a spot the Phillies are still in. The Phillies sit at 64-38, a winning percentage of .627. No other team in baseball has a winning percentage over .600. The next closest, the Guardians, and the Orioles, both at 61-41 with a .598 winning percentage. You got 3 games on those guys. The Dodgers are kind of lurking there. They're 61-42. They're 3.5 games back, but that's kind of been the 3.5 to 5, the zone that the Dodgers have been hanging in for the past month when it comes to their comparison to the Phillies. They're not really gaining ground. They're not losing ground, but they're not gaining ground. So the Phillies are still in prime position to get the top seed in the National League. They're totally fine there, right? If you get the top seed, great. If you get the second seed and you still get that first round bye and you don't have to worry about anything in the wild card series, awesome. Even better. Like, you're in great shape. So I love where the Phillies are at record-wise. I don't love how they're playing lately, but also just look at the run differential. There are other teams sliding right now. The Phillies' run differential is plus 109. The next highest, the Yankees at plus 99. The Dodgers are at plus 94. The Phillies are still 10 runs up on any other team in baseball in run differential. They're the only team over 100 in that mark. That's a pretty darn good spot to be. And if you peek at the division, which was the goal coming into this year, right? You weren't sitting here ahead of the season saying, well, the Philadelphia Phillies, they're going to run away with the NL East. We're focused on them being better than the Dodgers in the regular season. No, we wanted to win the NL East. And if you can get that done, that'll be a successful regular season. Those expectations shift as you see how good the team is over the course of the season. But right now, the Phillies are in a darn good spot in the division. The Braves are 9 games back. They're 54 and 46. They're only 8 games over 500, folks. That sounds like Phillies teams of the past. 9 games back at the end of July. It's a pretty good sign that the Phillies are probably going to win the NL East. You know what's funny? The Mets are only 10 and a half games back of the Phillies. They're only a game and a half back on the Atlanta Braves. And the Mets are surging. They've won 7 of their last 10 games. The Braves have lost 7 of their last 10 games. So should we be more worried about the Mets than the Braves? Is there a chance that the Braves finish third in this division? I mean, anything's possible. Baseball is weird. But if you're worried about the Phillies sliding in the division, I wouldn't be. I don't see the Braves making up 9 games. I don't see the Mets making up 10 and a half games. You are going to have to play both of those teams again. But, man, if you're worried about the division right now, you need to understand just how big of a lead that is. Let's look around baseball. The Baltimore Orioles, who lead the AL East, 2 games up. Guardians, 4.5 games up. Houston, 1 game up in the AL West. In the rest of the National League, Milwaukee, 6 games up in the Central. The Dodgers, 7 games up. The Phils, by 2 games, still have the largest divisional lead in baseball. Like, they're totally fine. And I'm not saying, like, oh, don't be worried about the Philadelphia Phillies because they haven't played well lately. They haven't, folks. I get it. And we're comparing the Phillies not necessarily to their peers anymore, but to what they could be. And part of that is fair. Part of that is unfair. You don't have to beat the greatest teams, and you don't have to beat the 27 Yankees to win the World Series this year. You have to beat the other teams currently playing baseball in 2024. Right now, the Phillies are still the best by record. While they're not playing the best, they are still the best on total sample size, and that's a great place to be. So it's not so much a don't worry about the Phillies from a day-to-day perspective. But in the back of your mind, I know you're thinking about seeding, even though it is July and we still got 2 months of the season left to go. You could be thinking about how they stack up against National League competitors. They're just fine. They have a tough stretch. We talked about it in yesterday's episode. When they play the Guardians, when they play the Yankees, those are going to be really important series for the Phillies to have good showing. Tomorrow, we're going to have a great preview of the matchup with the Cleveland Guardians and break down everything you need to know about one of their biggest home series of the year, especially considering the deadline, the slide that they're on right now, all of that stuff. It'll be really interesting to preview that series and the Yankees one as well. But where the Philadelphia Phillies are at right now in the standings, hopefully that gives you a little bit of ease when it comes to your uncomfortable feeling you may have, if you're like me, about the Philadelphia Phillies right now. And I'm unflappable when it comes to this baseball team. I know how talented they are. I'm normally a very positive person anyway. So the fact that I've got a little bit of an uneasy feeling in my gut when I watch this team right now says that probably a lot of you out there do as well, maybe more so. This segment was designed as a perspective type of segment for where the rest of baseball is. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you once again for checking us out. I appreciate it very much. Once again, we come to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form, wherever you receive your podcasts or find your podcast, I guess we'll say. You can rate and review. YouTube, if you haven't checked us out yet, please do. YouTube with the video element, you get to see my expressions. It feels a little bit more personal. And also, subscribing to the YouTube. You just hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Phillies YouTube channel. It gives you notifications when new episodes are posted. It costs you nothing. It takes like 2 seconds. Honestly, there's no reason not to do it if you like the content, and it's the ultimate way you could say thank you. So appreciate you either way for checking out Locked On Phillies, and I will talk to you next time on our next episode tomorrow.